Imagine you're 19 years old, broke and sleeping in your truck, a 2006 Chevy Silverado. And not because you're on some road trip adventure, but because it's better than being in a cramped, stinky, and crowded conditions on a Navy ship. You're working 80 to 90 hours a week, barely making $500 a week, and every day feels like you're stuck in a cycle that you just can't break. It feels like you're going nowhere fast, but deep, deep down, you know you're meant for something more. And then one day, you discover something that changes literally everything. Fast forward to just 1 year, and you're sitting on $405,000. A few years after that, you're a millionaire at 23. It sounds just unbelievable, but that is my story. Could it happen to you? Absolutely. Let me explain because this can definitely be possible for you no matter what, no matter where you're at in life, no matter what your circumstances are. And let me tell you why. I didn't grow up in a wealthy family. I didn't come from a background that set me up for success, and actually far from it. My parents were separated at a young age, and for years my life was filled with tons of instability. And at one point, we were living with my mom's boyfriend who was a drug dealer, and I'll never forget the constant parade of shady characters coming in and out of the house, and I was always waiting for something terrible to happen. And eventually, I ended up in foster care, and that became my normal for a while. So to say I didn't grow up with entrepreneurial dreams would be just an understatement. No one in my family was a business owner, and the idea of starting a company or creating financial freedom, it just wasn't even a conversation for me. I didn't have a college degree, barely made it through high school, and no one expected much from me because statistically, I was set up to fail. And that's what the world thought, and for a long time that's what I believed for myself too. But something in me just wouldn't let me settle for that fate. So I ended up joining the Navy. I didn't have any other plans. College wasn't an option for me, and sure as hell wasn't about to stay stuck in the environment I grew up in. So I thought the military would give me structure, purpose, or maybe just a way to build a better life. And at first, it did seem like it was the answer, but my first station was a ship based out of San Diego, California, and the city was beautiful. The ocean was right there, and it felt like kind of like a fresh start for me. But that feeling didn't last for very long at all. My living space was a 2 foot wide bed called a rack, and I was squeezed in a room between 100 other dudes that wasn't just my bed. It was my closet, my personal space, my whole world crammed into a tiny area, and it smelled terrible in there. The air was thick with sweat, dirty laundry, and the stale stench of bodies packed into like each other close together. People were snoring, coughing, groaning, just living their lives inches away from me, and it was just unbearable and honestly just disgusting. So that's when I made the decision that might seem small to some, but it was huge for me, and I started sleeping in my truck. It was a, like I said, 2006 Chevy Silverado, not exactly a luxury suite by any means, but it was better than that damn rack. It was bigger, it was cleaner, and most importantly, it was mine. It gave me the peace and quiet I desperately needed, but even though I had a little more space to breathe, my life was still far from comfortable. So I was making about $500 a week. Like I said, working 80 and 90 hours a week and barely getting by. I don't know if you've ever tried to live off $500 a week in a city like San Diego, but let me tell you, it's rough. And by the time I paid for gas, food, and the bare essentials, I had just nothing left. I was living paycheck to paycheck and couldn't see a way out. I knew I had to do something, but I had no idea what that something was. And that's when I started diving into all kinds of side hustles, searching for anything that could give me a way out of the military grind. And I tried literally everything: crypto, lost money; day trading, lost money; burned through my savings. I tried e-commerce, Amazon FBA, ended up with just a ton of products I couldn't sell. I even tinted car windows on weekends to hustle up a little extra cash, and nothing worked. Every single attempt at making extra money failed, and each failure hit me harder than the last because I wasn't working with a lot of money. I remember one day sitting in my truck, and after losing a few $1,000s and just a bad stock trade, I was just staring at my bank account empty again and thinking, what the hell am I going to do? I felt like just a complete failure. I had no degree, no connections, and every side hustle I'd ever tried just completely blew up in my face. And I felt stuck, like I was doomed to live out of the rest of my life just getting by, scraping together what little I could from week to week, but something in me just refused to give up. And that's when I stumbled across something that quite literally changed my life forever and changed everything for me. And that was rental arbitrage. At first, I didn't even know what it was. I was just scrolling online, looking for some side hustle ideas when I came across a video about how people were making thousands of dollars monthly, sometimes even daily, renting properties they didn't own, and the idea that seemed just almost too simple and honestly like a scam. And All it was renting a property from a landlord and then rent it out on Airbnb or other short-term rental platforms for more than you pay in rent, and you keep the difference as profit. I was skeptical at first, but at that point I had really nothing to lose. So I started digging deeper, and most people didn't realize that landlords usually just want someone reliable to pay rent on time and take care of the property. They don't want the hassle of managing short-term rentals, dealing with guests, cleaning, maintenance, and all that stuff. That's where I come in. And I would take care of everything: guest communications, cleaning, maintenance. So the landlord could just sit back and collect their rent. And I'd keep the profit from renting the property out on platforms like Airbnb or traveling nurses, business professionals, whatever it may be, on a short-term basis. And it wasn't easy getting started whatsoever. Most landlords, first of all, thought I was crazy, as you can imagine. And why would I let all I would get was, why would I let you rent my property just so you can turn around and rent it out again? That's what I always got asked. But I didn't give up. I kept just getting into my pitch, making sure that it was going to work. And I found a landlord that was willing to work with me and took a shot. I scraped together what little savings that I had, and I managed to almost cover the first month's rent of my first property. I furnished it, listed it on Airbnb, and within days I got my first booking. And then I got another booking. And that's when it kind of clicked in my head that this was real. I could actually make money doing this. And more than that, I could build a business around it. I was making more from one property than I was making from my Navy paycheck. So I reinvested every single dollar that I had made back into the business, and I saved up to get my second property, then my third, and each new property was a challenge: negotiating with landlords, furnishing the space, and dealing with guest issues. But I was completely relentless. And by the end, that first year, I had 15 properties under management, each one generating 2 to 3 times the rent I was paying. And that's how I made $405,000 in 1 year. And the craziest part, I didn't own a single one of those properties, and I didn't have to. I was making life-changing money using other people's houses. And here's why rental arbitrage works so well, especially for someone just starting out. So first, you don't need a huge amount of capital to get started. In traditional real estate, you need a massive down payment to buy a property, usually 20% or even more of the total purchase price. But with rental arbitrage, you don't need to buy the property. All you need is enough to cover the first month's rent, the security deposit, and some basic furnishings. That's it. You're in the game with a fraction of the cost. Second, the profit margins are just nuts. With traditional real estate, if you're lucky, you might make $100 in profit each month. Most people I know just break even. But with rental arbitrage, you can make thousands. For example, I was renting one property for $1,500 a month, but was making $4,500 from short-term guests. And that's $3,000 profit from just one property. Now multiply that by 10, 15, or even 20 properties, and you're looking at making life-changing income. And third, you can scale this business extremely fast because you're not tied down with mortgages and massive upfront costs. You can grow much, much faster than you could with traditional real estate, because personally, I went from 1 to 15 in less than a year. And here's the kicker: you don't have to physically present or be there for the properties to set them up. To run this business, I was still in the Navy working crazy hours, but I was managing everything remotely from my phone or even my laptop. Now, I know what you're probably thinking: why wouldn't the landlord just do it themselves? The truth is, most landlords don't want to deal with the hassle of short-term rentals. They don't want to handle guests, turnover, cleaning, and even maintenance. They just want consistent, reliable rent. That's where you come in, or people like me. You're offering them a hands-off solution. You take on the work, and they get guaranteed rent every single month. It's just a win-win. They get their rent paid, you make profit off their property. But this business isn't just about making money. It's about freedom. When I started, I was desperate to break free from the grind, and I didn't want to be stuck working 80 to 90 or even 40 hours a week for just the rest of my life. I wanted to control my own time, my own income, and most importantly, my own future. And rental arbitrage gave me that freedom, and now I help others on a daily basis to do exactly the same thing. And since I started teaching this business model, I've seen people from all walks of life transform their financial situations. Single moms, college students, people stuck in dead-end jobs. They're all building their own rental arbitrage businesses and creating the kind of financial freedom they really just never thought possible for them, the same way that I thought when I had first started. And look, I'm not anything special whatsoever. I didn't have a big head start. I didn't have family connections or college degree or anything like that. I was just a guy sleeping in his truck, trying to figure out how to escape the grind And if I can do this, like literally anyone can, bro. The hardest part is getting started. But once you take that first step, quite literally everything changes. If you're ready to take control of your life, if you're tired of being stuck, if you want to build just something that gives you the freedom and financial security you've probably been dreaming of, I definitely want to help you. And I've created what I call the B&B Syndicate program, where I break down everything I've learned from finding landlords, negotiating deals, to setting up your own properties and maximizing your own profits and automating the whole thing so it's not taking you a bunch of time out of your day or weeks. And this isn't a get-rich-quick scheme by any means. It's a real business, and like any business, it takes work. But if you're willing to put in the effort, the rewards can be life-changing. We've already beaten the odds just by being here. Now it's time to beat them again and build the life you've always dreamed of. Now, you can click the link down below to get started, and let me show you how other people have used other people's houses and how I've done the same thing and became a millionaire at 23, and how you can literally do that same thing for yourself. Yo, if you like this type of content, drop a like and subscribe down below, or you can hit me on Instagram at Stephen Bill Moss. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.